Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Annie Dickerson. Thanks for being on the show, Annie.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Annie is the founder of Goodegg Investments, which has been in business for less than a year. And in that time, they've co-syndicated more than 3,000 multifamily units and more than 1,500 self-storage units worth over $300 million. Annie's a working mom who initially got into syndications for as passive investors because they found them to be such a great way to build passive income. So then they could spend more time with their family. So Annie, give us a little update on what you're doing now and your focus and how you got into the syndication business.
Sure. Man, listening to you rattle off all that we've done this year, makes me tired just listening to it. But it's great. We love what we do. And, I started out in real estate investing. I sort of fell into it really through house hacking. I was in my early 20s, and my husband and I were about to do the really cool thing of buying a loft or a condo, and our realtor talked us into buying a duplex. And we thought, what are we going to do with a duplex? But he said these magic words. He said, if you play your cards right, you could get this thing to be cash flow positive. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I liked those words together. And so we bought that duplex and then a few more and then some multifamily units. And then that's as we continue to scale, our friends and family started to get interested, and that's when we got into the syndication space because we wanted to bring our friends and family along for the ride. And so what happened was, as I was getting into the syndication space, my first thought was, I'm going to lead my own syndication. I've done lots of these smaller multifamily deals. I can do a bigger deal on my own. And so I went down that path. And I realized being a syndicator is hard. There's a lot to it, right? There's so many different pieces. You have the relationships with the brokers. You have to deal with the lenders. You have to do the inspections. And that's just on the acquisition side. Then you have to manage the asset. You have to talk to the investors. There's so much stuff to do. And I was trying to find my place in all this. And I came across someone who said, you know what, you're in the midst of all this. Why don't you try, coming on and helping us co-syndicate this deal and helping us raise some money? And my initial thought was, raise money? That's the worst part of the whole thing. Why the heck would I want to focus on raising money? But he was very persuasive. And so I said, okay, fine. I'll raise a little bit of money for your deal, but I'm going to save my good investors for my own deal. Thank you very much. So I gave it a try, and I loved it. And looking back, it makes total sense because I've been involved in education for most of my adult life. And raising money is all about investor education. Because most of what you do and the people that you talk to are people who have never heard of syndications before. And so you have to break down terms like capital injection into easy to understand terms. And so I fell in love with that, and that's a big piece of what we do at Goodegg Investments.
Nice. Very nice. I know, since we met, I think you and I met in Boston, at an event, and just, great. Watching the growth of your company and seeing the cool things you all are doing. It's very impressive. So Annie, I guess, so give us a little background about Goodegg Investments and what your all's focus is.
Yeah. So our mission at Goodegg is to help people invest in cash flowing commercial assets all without the hassles of being a landlord. Both my business partner, Julie, and I started out with those small rentals like many people do. And, then you get a phone call like I did earlier this summer from your property manager. And I swear this really happened. She calls me up one day out of the blue and she says, "Hey, you sitting down?" And that's never a good sign when your property manager says that to you, right? She says, "Hey, you sitting down?" And I'm like, "Why?" And she says, "Okay, so you know that tenant that we were about to evict?" So there was a tenant we were about to evict because she wasn't paying for something like 6 straight months. So we had to evict her. We were going to evict her the next day. So she says, "You know that tenant? Well, she stocked up all the sinks and the tubs in her unit, left the water running, and then she took off." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to sit down now." And she says, "Well, she flooded her unit and the one next door and the one next door to that." So at this point, I'm just laughing because I can't even, it's just beyond me to grasp at that moment. And in the months that followed, we had to, one, let it dry. Turns out that mold remediation takes a long time. So we had to let it dry, and then we could go in and make the repairs and turn over the unit. Meanwhile, we had to deal with insurance. So it's hassle like that I think a lot of people who are getting into real estate don't really foresee until they get into the middle of it. And so a big part of what we do through Goodegg Investments is we help people to invest passively in real estate syndications so that they can still invest in great cash flowing assets without having to deal with being a landlord.
Nice. So, I liked your statement earlier when you said raising money is all about investor education. And, I can see, you and Julie, you're putting in lots of work, in helping educate investors. And so, why don't we focus on that a little bit, and let's talk about some of the, most important things that a passive investor needs to know, to make a good investment, right? And then we'll go into maybe some of their common questions and things like that. But what are a few things that you could lay out that are some of the most important things as a passive investor that you're going to help educate them about?
Sure. So one of the very first things we always talk to investors about, every investor that we've talked to, we always ask about their investing goals. I think before you look at any property, any investment package, the first thing that you're always going to want to do is take stock of your own finances and what you're trying to accomplish through investing in real estate. So that's the first thing that we talk to people about is, are you trying to invest for cash flow? Are you investing for appreciation? What's your appetite for risk? Are you wanting to be in this short term or long term? What if you invest in something that's illiquid, that you can't get your money out for a certain amount of time? So we help them to think through those things first because, real estate syndications, as great as they are certainly not for everyone. If you're just starting out and you only have a few $1,000s in the bank, you certainly should not be investing in a syndication that's going to hold your money for 5 years or more and has a minimum investment of $50,000 or $100,000. So we want to make sure first and foremost that it's a good fit. And then once we get into talking about the actual deal, there's so much to learn. I mean, there's everything from what are the hold times to expect? What's the process of investing in a syndication? What are the projected returns? What are some good returns versus not so good returns? So there's a lot to learn and a lot to get yourself familiar with. And so one other big piece beyond your investing goals that we tell people to focus on is the partners that they're going to be working with. So yes, it's important what market you're investing in, and yes, it's important what type of asset you're investing in, But we've found that one of the most important aspects is who you're investing with. That team can make or break the investment. And so we always tell our investors, take the time to find a good sponsor, operator, partner to work with, because they're gonna make a terrible investment great. They know what they're doing. They've done it before. They have a good track record. And so then you can just hitch your wagon to theirs. So that's the hard part, is finding a great sponsor.
So I was going to ask you a little bit about the process of investing in a syndication and how you guide that investor through. And I think, how you find a good sponsor is going to be part of that, right? So could you elaborate a little bit on, that passive investor that's listening, how do they find that sponsor? How do they find somebody like that? If they've, maybe this is the first show they've listened to about syndication, and they never heard that term before. They have no idea what we're talking about. But how do they find that person so they can start to build that relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. First fallback, I always say, Google it. See what you can find on Google. It's probably not going to be the best people to invest with, but it'll give you an idea of who's out there, who's ranking on Google. But then really where you're going to start to find the good sponsors are when you get out from behind your computer screen and you go to the meetups, you go to the events, and you start talking with people. And what you're going to find is as you talk with more and more people, you'll start to hear some of the same names again and again. And then you can go back behind your computer screen and you can look up those sponsors. And a big piece of what we say to look for in a sponsor is that track record. So then you can reach out to that sponsor and ask, what have you done before? What projects do you currently have in your portfolio? And also you can ask for some references, who are some current investors that are invested in your projects, and would it be possible to talk with them? So those would be the main pieces. Is start with a quick Google search, see what you can find, talk with people in your network, and then go out and meet people at these real estate events, at these local meetups, as well as regional conferences, and then you'll be well in touch with some good sponsors.
What would be some of the most common questions maybe investors have when they come to you, Annie? About if they don't have much education, about syndication. What's going to be their most burning questions?
Ooh, that's a good one. There's so many questions that investors ask. I think top of mind, one of the biggest questions people always want to know is, what are the returns? What do the returns look like? Most people who come to us have invested in some form or fashion in something before, something maybe like the stock market, or they've invested in rentals. So they want to know, okay, this newfangled thing you're calling a real estate syndication, how does it compare to other things I've invested in the past? So I would say a lot of investors want to know about the projected returns. And of course, we can't guarantee any returns, but we typically give them a range that they can expect on the deals that we typically invest in. Nice.
So, what else, I guess, what are some of the key things that, maybe that past investor doesn't even know the questions that they need to ask, right? But what are the key things that you're going to say, okay, I need to make sure you know this?
Oh, that's such a good question. I love that question. Okay, so we've talked about real estate investing goals. We've talked about finding a good sponsor. I would say market is another thing. A big thing that we try to look for in the deals that we invest in is that we want to make sure that they're in growing markets. So markets with good fundamentals, which means good job growth, good job diversity, population growth, barriers to physical growth, if there are any, things like a mountain or an ocean nearby, good local government, things like that. So you definitely want to do your research with the market. And when you're about to invest in a syndication deal, ask those questions. Ask why the sponsor chose that particular market. Maybe it's because they are physically in that market. Maybe they live there. Or maybe it's because they realized that a lot was happening, that people were moving to that area and demand was going up. So definitely put your research into that market. And I would say, some of the other things that we want to make sure that our investors know are things like, what to expect during this process. Investing in a real estate syndication is very different from investing in a rental property. Most people are very familiar with investing in a rental. You find a broker, you look at properties, you network with, you find a good lender and put an offer and get it done. But a syndication is very different, right? So you find that sponsor and then the sponsor has a deal. So then what? Do you go and visit, or what do you do, right? And so that's another piece is we talk to our investors about the process. And so what that looks like typically for the deals that we invest in is, when our sponsor partners have a deal, then we will work with them to sort of vet the deal, make sure it's something that we personally would invest in. And then once the deal has met those criteria, then we will open up the deal to our investors. And typically we'll do that just through an email to our Goodegg Investor Club. And we'll go over the highlights of the deal, why we think it's a great deal to invest in. And then we'll open it up for what we call a soft reserve. So soft reserve is a way to just save your spot in line. As you're learning more about this deal and as you're considering whether to invest, a soft reserve allows you to hold up your hand and say, hey, I want to invest $100,000 in this deal, so hold that spot for me. Don't let anybody else take it, because these deals are always first come, first serve. So if you've got your money ready, you've done your research, you've learned about what syndications are, and you're ready to invest, then you will get a spot in the deal. So you want to do all of your research before the deal actually opens. So then once you put in your soft reserve, typically there is an investor webinar. So during that investor webinar, you'll get a chance to hear, sometimes directly from the sponsor team, how they are planning to run this property. Things like, why they chose this property, what the business plan is, what the comps are, and most importantly, you'll get a chance to ask your questions and hear questions from other investors. So then once you've reviewed the investment summary package and the investor webinar, then it's time to confirm your spot in the deal. So at this point, we'll then reach back out to you and say, okay, well, here's all the information we've given it to you. Now, can you let us know, are you going to invest or not? So some people will pull out at that time, and then we'll open new spots up for new people. And then the next step then would be to sign the legal docs, which includes the PPM, the private placement memorandum, the subscription agreement, and the operating agreement, and then to fund the deal. So you can wire in your money or you can send in a check. And then we tell our investors it's time to celebrate, because the active work is done. As a passive investor, you have no further work, no further responsibilities in this deal, really. Now you get to sit back, and after the close, then what you can expect is every month you'll get an update from us. It's kind of like when you sponsor a child in a foreign country, and then you get those updates every so often with the picture and the letter. So it's sort of like that. You get every month or so, you get an update from us with some photos of the progress and a little snippet of what's going on at the property. And then either every month or every quarter, depending on the deal, you would get your cash flow distributions. And then every year you would get a K1 for your taxes. So that's another big piece, is that process, learning that process and being prepared for that process is a big part of the learning curve for our investors.
Great. I appreciate you explaining that, Annie, and going through that process. To change directions just a little bit, tell us, what do you tell somebody that comes to you and says, I really want to get into this business? What do I need to do? What are a couple key things you tell them?
Oh man, to get into this business, the way I got into this business was just by talking to people. And I think when you talk to syndicators, that's a lot of them will tell you that it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And so that was the same for me. Was I really would not have gotten into this. I would not have met my business partner if I had not put myself out there, gotten out from behind my computer screen and gotten out there and took those chances and, took those awkward moments as they came, but I pushed myself to network, even though I'm an introvert and it's not my natural state. But I knew that having those relationships would really make the difference. So that's the biggest piece, I would say, is go out and talk to people, and through that you'll find your place.
What's been the hardest part of the syndication process for you?
I'm thinking. The hardest.
Was it maybe finding sponsors or raising capital or educating in the beginning?
Yeah. I think the hardest part of this whole process for us, because we're always looking for sponsor partners that we can work with. I think that's the hardest part. Is people always say, oh, it must be so hard to raise capital and talk to all these investors. And you know what? That's the fun part, is talking to investors and telling people about these great opportunities. But the hard part is really going out and finding sponsors who are at a point in their investing trajectory where they've done some deals already. They've got some deals under their belt, so they have a solid track record, but they're looking to scale. And so we're always looking for sponsors at that critical moment. And so that can be hard to find.
What would you say is the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Luck, sheer dumb luck. No, there's definitely an element of luck, I think, in timing. But one thing I think that I do very well at is that I just get it done. If I'm not afraid to fail fast. In fact, I've got a Post-it right here next to me on my wall that says fail faster, because it's all about, getting out there and trying things. And if it doesn't work, then you shift gears and you try something new. And I think just like you're doing this podcast, every day instead of once a week or once a month, by doing it in rapid succession and assessing your progress along the way, you're able to grow and you're able to make progress much, much faster.
So what's some way that you've recently improved your business that we could all apply to ours?
Ooh. I think one thing that we've recently done, because, you mentioned at the beginning in the intro that, our business has only been around for, 8 or 9 months. And in that time, we just announced our 10th deal. And in that time, as you can imagine, doing 10 deals is a lot. We're running from one to the next and trying to build the plane as we're flying it, fail faster, right? And so we've just been running this whole time. And so recently, for the first time, we've had a chance to slow down and breathe and look at our progress, but more importantly, to build systems. When I worked in the corporate world, I always hated systems and process. It was something I would always buck up against. But, now that I'm an entrepreneur and I'm creating my own business, I realize how important those systems are. And so now that I'm in charge, I get to build it the way that I want to and the way that's effective for our business. So I think even if you're, just one person or two people, it's important to build those systems so that you can have consistency and so that your investors, your clients, your customers can really see your professionalism and to reap the benefits of those systems.
Nice. So before we have to go, tell us something that you all are excited about right now, maybe something Goodegg's doing or working on.
Oh man, this next year we are so excited because these first few months were really all about, establishing these sponsor relationships and figuring out how we could grow our investor base and raise capital for these deals. So now that we've gotten a few of those under our belts, the next adventure is really building our brand. So is really putting the megaphone to our brand and reaching more people. Our goal is to help as many people as we can to learn about this thing called real estate syndications. Whether or not they invest with us, we just want them to know that this opportunity is out there for them and that it's a great way to build wealth. So on the horizon, we've got an online course called Passive Real Estate Investor Academy that we're going to launch a few times in the next year. We are talking about launching our own podcast. We'll do some speaking engagements, and hopefully, don't hold me to this, but hopefully I will also write a book in the next year or two.
We'll hold you to that.
Yeah. Thought that might be the case.
Well, thank you so much, Annie. You've been a great guest, and tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you, learn more about Goodegg.
Of course. The best way to learn about Goodegg is to go to our website. It's goodegginvestments.com, and you can reach out to me directly at annie@goodegginvestments.com.
Great. Thank you so much. And I hope the listeners will connect with Annie. And I hope you'll also go to LifeBridge Capital and connect with me and schedule a call so I can help you any way I can. And go to our Facebook group so you can ask questions and you can send me questions to ask our guests. And we look forward to chatting with you, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.